The movie Heretic is essentially Hugh Grant spending 2 hours explaining religion to a pair of Mormon chicks using only logic and facts. If only he weren't such a massive creep and took a little less extreme measures, he might have actually had a point. Welcome to First Time Watching. Please like and subscribe as we dive straight into the explanation. Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton sit on a park bench, casually discussing peen sizes. Paxton insists that the Magnum condom brand is nothing more than a marketing gimmick, but Barnes disagrees. According to her sister, her ex-husband had one of those so-called monster dongs, allegedly comparable to the appendage elephants use to pick up peanuts. Paxton then shares a bizarre story about how she found divine confirmation while watching porn. These Mormon girls are in desperate need of some real-world experience because her mind is clearly running wild over subjects she knows absolutely nothing about. But the reason she's rambling isn't just curiosity, it's frustration. She hasn't managed to convert a single person to their church, and it's weighing on her. Barnes tries to reassure her, casually mentioning that she's already converted 8 people. Instead of calming her, this only makes Paxton panic more. The two continue their day, going around town badgering random strangers with Jesus facts. But they're mostly ignored, so the girls start to do their scheduled house calls with potential converts. They arrive at the first address, locking up their bikes in the rain, and while Barnes double-checks the location, Sister Paxton knocks on the door. Mr. Reed answers, and the girls introduce themselves. They explain that he had previously requested information about the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, and they're here to answer any questions he might have. Paxton turns into a nervous, rambling mess, clearly expecting him to shut the door in their faces. But instead, Reed smiles and gestures to the heavy rain. Speaking of people like Noah, it's coming down pretty hard out there. He then invites them inside. Before stepping in, Barnes hesitates. Is there a woman inside? She asks. Mormon rules dictate that they can't enter unless another female is present. Reed reassures them. My wife is home. Does that count? And with that, the girls let their guard down and step inside. Reed takes their coats and casually mentions something peculiar. By the way, the walls and ceiling of my house have metal in them. That okay with you? Barnes doesn't think much of it and shrugs. That's fine. As Reed disappears into the back to check on the snacks and his wife's pie, Barnes notices a butterfly trapped inside, repeatedly flitting against the ceiling lamp in a desperate attempt to escape. Reed soon returns, carrying 2 Cokes and a candle. My wife is a bit shy, he says with a smile, but the pie is nigh. Barnes reminds him that his wife needs to be in the room with them, per church protocol. Reed nods in understanding, but makes no move to get her. Instead, he sits down and enthusiastically throws out the statement, I think it's good to be religious. Barnes finds this refreshing. In this day and age, religion isn't the center of culture anymore. It's fading over time. Paxton is eager to explain the Heavenly Father's plan, but before she can, Reed interrupts with yet another question. Where are you both from? Paxton, the joyful and delightfully gullible little bundle of sunshine that she is, immediately announces that she's from Utah and one of 8 daughters. Barnes shares that she is from Philadelphia. Reed asks if they were both raised in the church. Paxton enthusiastically replies, born and raised, while Barnes adds that after her father's passing, her mother moved them around in search of a church that matched their beliefs. Reed seizes the moment to emphasize the importance of finding a doctrine one genuinely believes in, admitting he has struggled with that himself, trying to discover the one true religion. Paxton mentions that their teacher always encouraged them to broaden their knowledge, explaining how Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church, explored various religions before ultimately deciding that none of them fit his beliefs, leading him to establish his own. Reed's interest is piqued, as this sounds to him like a classic get-rich-quick scheme. He recalls how Joseph was visited at night by an angel named Moroni, who conveniently directed him to some buried golden plates near his home. After translating these plates, which were supposedly written in an ancient Egyptian language, very commonly spoken in New York, of course, the plates mysteriously vanished, and the angel instructed him not to seek them again. Fortunately, the translations became the Book of Mormon. Barnes suddenly mentions that the pie smells incredible, so Reed asks if they can guess what kind his wife is baking. Paxton guesses blueberry pie, which turns out to be correct. But back to serious matters. Reed's next question question takes a somber turn. He asks Barnes how her daddy died. Barnes mumbles, Lou Gehrig's disease, but Reed misunderstands, chuckling as he thinks she said blueberry disease. Paxton quickly corrects him, and Reed apologizes. Returning to the topic at hand, he asks if Barnes has ever perceived any signs from her father on the other side. She answers no, all while rubbing a scar on her arm, which Reed notices. The atmosphere turns a bit awkward, but Paxton lightens the mood by declaring that, when she dies, she wants to come back as a butterfly to follow her loved ones, landing delicately on their fingertips so they'll know it's her. Suddenly, the lights go off, and they sit in darkness, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Reed apologizes, explaining that the house has a few quirks, but the good news is, it's pi o'clock. He also apologizes for offering them Coke instead of water. In Mormon beliefs, caffeine is a no-go. He clearly gave it to them on purpose. But Reed then announces that he has an awkward, potentially insensitive question that Reed believes will add depth to their conversation. How do they feel about polygamy? Barnes and Paxton instantly look even more uncomfortable, but Reed presses on, asking how they feel about a man having multiple wives. He explains that when the church was founded in 1823, it practiced polygamy, but in the 1890s, that notion was scrapped due to its controversial nature and the growing societal disapproval. Barnes clarifies that, in the early days of the church, polygamy was seen as a spiritual mission to produce more believers for the Mormon faith. However, it was eventually abandoned because the church no longer needed that practice. Reed suggests that Joseph Smith introduced polygamy to satisfy his own desires, and wonders if he used religion to justify infidelity and kitty diddling. His underlying question is, if revelations from God are filtered through flawed human beings who are prone to sin and deceit, how can anyone be sure of their truth? Paxton responds that they know it's true because of how it makes them feel. Reed appreciates her truth, and it lightens the mood. He shares that he dedicated a good portion of his life to studying various religions. In his exploration, he discovered that each religion believes it's the sole true faith, but upon closer inspection, none of them actually hold up. The last thing he intended to do, as he blows out the candle, was to find the one true religion, but unfortunately, he seems to have stumbled upon it. Barnes once more repeats her burning question, can they please meet his wife? Reed responds with a grin and gets up to head toward the door that should lead to the kitchen. As he exits the room, he flips a switch, and the lights turn on. They seem to be on some sort of timer. Paxton and Barnes decide it's time to politely wrap up the conversation so they can get the heck out of there. Barnes picks up the candle from the table and turns it around. The label reads, "Blueberry pie scented." Reed returns and announces that his wife is finally ready to meet them. He leads them toward the back room where he claims his wife is waiting. However, instead of following him, Barnes pretends to receive a fake phone call from their church contact. Reed tells them he'll wait for them in the kitchen and strides off. As Barnes and Paxton prepare to leave, a sudden realization hits Barnes. Their bike keys are in their coat pockets, which Reed hung up for them in the back. After a quick discussion, the girls accept the possibility that they might have to walk home and try the door to get out. However, they find the door locked with no visible way to open it. The girls are officially trapped inside the house with Reed. Paxton attempts to call their church elder, but there's no reception. With no other options, they reluctantly decide they'll have to ask Reed to let them go. Just as they're about to make their move, the lights flicker off again. When Barnes fiddles with the timer, the lights stubbornly remain off. They decide to follow the hallway to join Mr. Reed in what appears to be a peculiar mixture of a study, library, and chapel. They tell him that they just got off the phone with one of their sisters, and they apologize for needing to head back right away. Their coats hang over a bench, and as both girls put them on, Barnes notices that her bike key is missing from her jacket pocket. After mustering up all their courage, the girls ask Mr. Reed for help with the front door, but he bluntly tells them that that door won't open again. He explains that the deadbolts are on a timer, and he got so wrapped up in conversation that he forgot to make sure they don't lock, so the door will remain locked until the next morning. If they want to leave, they'll have to exit through the back of the house. He makes it very clear that they can leave whenever they wish, as he feels slightly offended that they felt the need to fabricate a story about a call from the church. The girls stick to their lie, insisting someone did call them. Reed points out that when they entered his home, he asked if they were okay with the metal inside the walls. Those metals block all cell reception, making it impossible impossible for them to receive a call while inside. As Reed stands before two doors, Barnes asks which one leads outside, to which Reed asks if they have a preference. Paxton requests one last time if he could please go get his wife and have her escort the girls outside. Reed poses a thought-provoking question of his own. Do they genuinely believe his wife is in the next room? Especially after figuring out the scented candle and the fact that there's no blueberry pie. If they truly believe his wife is there, he'll go ask her to join them, but he urges them to consider that question in a religious context. Do they believe in God simply because someone told them he was real when they were young, even as doubts crept in as they grew older? When God took Barnes's father away in such a cruel manner, was all of it a lie? And if they admit to that now, could they still look at themselves in the mirror? Feeling frightened, Barnes asks if they could use his phone, to which he replies that he doesn't have one. Determined to leave, she declares that they're going to exit through the back and heads toward the left door. When she opens it, a single tear streams down her face as she closes it again, frustrated. She then walks toward the right door, opening it to reveal a flight of stairs that leads down into a basement of sorts. Meanwhile, at the church, one of the fathers notices that Paxton and Barnes haven't returned yet. Back at the house, Reed asks the girls if they notice the outside of his home. He points out that, while it may look small, the back of the house is against a hill, which means they would have to go down before they can make their way out. Barnes firmly insists that they want to leave the house as quickly as possible because they're feeling uncomfortable with the guy's creepy shenanigans. Reed offers to help them make the right choice regarding which door will lead them outside. As Paxton steps back into the middle of the room, away from the door, she spots a very sharp letter opener. To assist in their decision about which door might lead them to their freedom, Reed pulls out a game of Monopoly distributed by the Parker brothers. He shares that over 1 billion people worldwide have started a game of Monopoly, but only a small fraction ever finished even a single game. Then he pulls out a Bible and asks if that fact reminds them of anything. He then inquires if they've ever played a game called the Landlord's Game from 1904, which is nearly identical to Monopoly. However, the woman who created the Landlord's Game made barely a penny from it, while the man who sold it to the Parker brothers, after slapping on a new name, became a millionaire. As he goes on with his rant, Reed plays a song by the Hollies called The Air That I Breathe. He continues by discussing the big three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He refers to Judaism as the original edition or the Landlord's Game. Christianity is the most popular edition, and Islam is the newer, second most popular edition that he jokingly describes as the upgraded version of Monopoly, where you pay with a credit card. Next, he asks the girls for their Book of Mormon, placing it atop the Bible, and refers to Mormonism as the zany regional spin-off edition, while also placing a Bob Ross edition of Monopoly on the table. Reed emphasizes that all these religions are iterations of the same source material. He claims to know the girls have heard The Air That I Breathe before, because they must also be familiar with Creep by Radiohead. He explains that the Hollies sued Radiohead for plagiarism and won, leading Radiohead to sue Lana Del Rey for her song Get Free, also successfully. All this, he argues, is because of iterations. Over time, these iterations dilute the message and obscure the original. So the question lingers, why is it that Judaism, the original religion that should be closest to the source material, makes up only 0.2% of the population? The answer is simple. They don't advertise. Missionaries come knocking on doors to sell their ideologies, and tonight, Reed declares, he would like to sell his. As he turns off the lights, Paxton can't shake the feeling that she sees someone standing behind a curtain in the corner of the room. Reed's theory is that the holy texts we know today are merely iterations of ancient mythological stories that have been passed down for centuries. The story of a savior born to a virgin who sacrifices himself for the greater good has existed for at least 1,000 years before Jesus was even born. Reed has a wall covered with depictions of 12 gods who predate Jesus, gods whose combined stories, he claims, form the basis of many religious narratives. He compares this to Star Wars, Episode 1, because if given enough time, people might one day worship Jar Jar Binks. He then moves to the door on the left and writes the word belief on it and says, if God is real, then he watches us when we pleasure ourselves, judges us for it, and hates gay people even though he supposedly made them in his own image. That's terrifying. On the right door, he writes disbelief. If there is no God, and we're just horny ants on a rock, stumbling through life without higher purpose, then that's terrifying too. Now, he wants the girls to make a choice. If they truly believe everything written in their holy texts, without a single doubt, they should choose belief. But if there is even the slightest uncertainty, they should pick disbelief. In Reed's opinion, all religions are the same capitalistic cults designed to control their followers. Fake, just like the so-called church they are standing in now. During his monologue, Reed throws the Book of Mormon onto the floor. Barnes rushes over to pick it up, grabbing the sharp letter opener in the process. Sensing an opportunity, Paxton quickly tells Reed that they agree with him. They'll take the disbelief door and leave. But Barnes isn't fooled. She turns to Paxton and warns her that this isn't his real intention. Barnes steps toward the belief door. It doesn't matter what we say, she tells Paxton. Reed isn't going to let us go just because we agree with his theories. She believes he's studying them, trying to learn something based on which door they choose. Barnes confronts Reed. What exactly are you looking for? What do you want from us? If she's right, then the only thing that truly matters is what they actually believe. She then challenges his argument, calling it thin at best. When he cited the small percentage of the global population that practices Judaism, he conveniently left out Holocaust victims, reducing it to nothing more than a setup for a punchline about missionaries. Nor did he acknowledge that in Islam, Muslims don't even believe that Christ was resurrected. And while he points out similarities between ancient mythological gods and Jesus, he glosses over the fact that one of them has a freaking bird's head. Barnes argues that belief isn't black or white. It isn't as simple as choosing between belief and disbelief. There's an entire spectrum that he is ignoring. She turns to Paxton. Do you still believe there is a God? Paxton answers yes. Then we leave through the belief door, Barnes decides. The girls push open the left door and step onto a staircase. As they descend, Reed closes the door behind them. At the bottom, they find another door leading into a dimly lit basement room. A single table and chair sit in the center. Paxton whispers, "What does he want from us?" Barnes tells her that Reed is too smart for this to be random. He has to know that someone would come looking for them, which means he only has two options: let them go or kill them. She turns to Paxton and tells her, from now on, when he says something we don't agree with, we challenge him. We might not be a physical threat, but we can be an intellectual one. Inside the basement, there is another door. Behind it lies the staircase from the disbelief door. Footsteps echo from the other side. Barnes quickly presses the letter opener into Paxton's hand. If I say the code word magic underwear, stab him in the neck. It has to be you. He's watching me too closely. The disbelief door creaks open. A woman, covered in a cloth, steps inside, holding a blueberry pie. She cracks her back and kneels into an uncomfortable position, while Reed blasts Radiohead's Creep through the speakers and plays with a dollhouse modeled after his own house. Barnes runs up the disbelief stairs and finds a hidden door partway up. When she can't seem to open it, she heads to the top of the stairs and looks under the disbelief door, spotting a pack of matches on the floor. She reaches for them, but before she can grab them, the music cuts off. Through the speakers, Reed says, "I had to be sure before I introduced you to her." Barnes runs back down and asks, "Sure about what?" Reed replies, "You are now in the presence of a living prophet of God." The uncomfortable woman rises from her kneeling position and sits at the table. Reed explains that he invited them here because he has witnessed a miracle, one that proves all known religions are false, but he needs witnesses to verify it. The so-called prophet, a disheveled woman who looks like she hasn't seen sunlight in 20 years, starts eating the blueberry pie in front of her. Reed then casually mentions that he laced the pie with wolfsbane and belladonna, meaning she will be dead within minutes. And that, he claims, is when they will witness the miracle. By the grace of God, she will resurrect. The woman moans loudly and then collapses face first onto the table. Reed instructs the girls to check her pulse to confirm her death. Reluctantly, they both comply. She's dead. A tense silence fills the room as they wait for her to return to life. Then, a bell rings throughout the house. Reed gets up, walks to the front door, and opens it. Standing outside is one of the church's elders. He asks Reed if he has seen two young women from his congregation. Reed lies. "No visitors all day," he says. Meanwhile, Barnes discreetly pulls at the rug on the floor, trying to drag the matches closer to her. If they can start a fire, they might be able to alert the elder, but they're too late. Reed shuts the door and returns. The girls keep tugging at the rug until the matches are finally within reach. Then the bell rings again. The elder has returned. In a panic, the girls run down into the basement. But just as they reach the bottom, Paxton freezes. "I swear, she just moved," she whispers. They fumble with the matches, trying to light one while the elder outside continues talking to Reed. He is trying to convert him because that's kinda his job. Before they can get a flame going, Paxton gasps. The woman is gone. A chill runs down her spine. Then, suddenly, the woman appears right behind her. Before Paxton can react, the resurrected woman vomits all over her nice shoes. The woman mumbles, "They unplugged my brain. This isn't real." Reed enters the room and kneels beside her, thanking the prophet for her passage to the other side. He then helps her out of the basement, leading her away from the girls. When he returns, he steps in close, plucks a match from Paxton's hand, and smiles. "Something very interesting is happening, because I know one of you has been lying to me, and I know this because of the way the fire reacts to you. One of you has a very big secret, but we'll learn more soon. First, the important question, because soon, books will be written about his prophet. So, what did you witness?" His voice grows harsher, more aggressive, his thirst for knowledge becoming unsettling. Barnes shakes her head. "I have no idea what I saw, but Paxton, afraid, answers, I saw her come back to life, and she described something on the other side. She said it felt like none of this is real." Reed's expression darkens. "Now you know," he says. "He makes them an offer. He can show them God if they are willing to die. Temporarily, of course. Like the prophet, they can be brought back. It's not frightening," he assures them. "Not knowing is the frightening part." He offers them something no religion in the world can: certainty. Barnes finally understands his plan. It all makes sense now. She was wondering the entire time how he was going to convince them to kill themselves. She tells him what they just witnessed wasn't a miracle at all. It was just a magic trick. The woman didn't die. She had a near-death experience. A lack of oxygen can cause hallucinations. Barnes now believes Reed has a whole group of women trapped here, keeping them on the brink of death just to study them, to interrogate them about the afterlife. Reed's expression twitches. Cute theory, but it's not based on facts. Barnes stares him down. This isn't a miracle. It's magic underwear. But before she could finish saying the code word, he slashes her throat. Blood sprays from her neck as she stumbles back, gasping. Paxton turns and runs up the stairs, screaming for help, only to find there's no way out. Reed calls after her in a calm voice, "Come back down. Barnes will resurrect soon." Paxton grips the railing, her heart pounding. She forces herself to remember Barnes' words. Challenge him. Paxton walks down the stairs and finds Reed sitting next to Barnes's corpse. But she isn't resurrecting. Reed turns to Paxton and tells her that Barnes will not be coming back. He takes a knife, cuts open her arm where he previously spotted the scar, and removes a small metal tube. "Ah," he says, "the implant. This is why she can't come back to us." Reed tries to convince Paxton that Barnes was never real, that she was just a program, a fake. He claims he knew this because of the way the candles reacted to her presence. Paxton shakes her head. "I don't understand. Explain it to me." Reed asks if she's familiar with the butterfly dream theory, the idea that a man once dreamt he was a butterfly and later wondered, was I dreaming of being a butterfly? Or am I now a butterfly dreaming I am a man? He believes that humans exist in simulations so advanced that we can't distinguish between real life and the dream world. And as the prophet said, none of this is real. Fire, he claims, reacts differently around simulated people. That's why Sister Barnes didn't resurrect. But when Paxton dies, she will pass through the simulation and awaken in the real world. As he speaks, he slams his knife onto the table in front of her. Paxton stares him down. "That's just a theory." Reed's eyes light up with excitement. He welcomes her to disprove him. She takes a deep breath. "The thing you pulled from Barnes's arm, it's not a microchip. It's a contraceptive implant to prevent pregnancy." Reed asks, "Tell me, have you ever met a Mormon missionary on birth control?" Paxton hesitates. "No," but Paxton asks, "Is your simulation hypothesis testable?" Reed shrugs. "No, it's faith. You either believe it or you don't." "Then, I don't believe it," Paxton says. Reed tilts his head. "Did you believe the miracle?" At first, Paxton admits, she thinks something happened that Reed didn't anticipate, forcing him to come up with an explanation on the spot. A simulation theory that doesn't quite But hold up. So, Reed asks, do you agree with Barnes that the prophet was just hallucinating? No, Paxton says. I think you switched the bodies upon death. I just haven't figured out how yet. I believe you expected the elder to ring the doorbell, knowing it would pull our attention away. The moment we left the room, someone else entered through a hidden door and swapped the body. The body was different when we returned. She believes Reed gave the woman a script of speech to deliver after her supposed resurrection. But what he didn't anticipate was that she would go off book when she mumbled, "This isn't real." He hadn't expected that. Now, Paxton believes he's scrambling to recover from his mistakes. And failing. Reed grins. If your theory is true, then there must be another way into the basement. Paxton moves the table, revealing a hidden hatch. Reed gestures toward it. Then there should be a dead body at the bottom of those stairs. Paxton nods. Correct. And how do you plan to test that theory? I'll go down, she says, because now I need to know the truth. Reed's expression turns cold. Then don't go down there unless you're ready to discover the one true religion. Paxton climbs down the ladder and finds the corpse of the woman Reed poisoned. Above her, Reed looks down through the hatch and he slams it shut. The underground passage leads her through a series of cult-like doors. The last one is locked by using the lock on Barnes's bike. She reaches into her coat pocket. Inside is the key to the bike lock. She unlocks it and steps inside to find a room filled with cages. Inside them, women lie on the floor, starving and near death. Paxton's stomach turns. Reed steps into the room behind her. Well, he asks, have you figured it out yet? Tell me, what is the one true religion? Paxton pieces it together. When we first entered your house, she says, you left us alone. We assumed you were talking to your wife, but you weren't. You went outside to move our bikes. That's when you took the lock off Barnes's bike and slipped the key into my pocket. We thought that was a mistake, she continues, but it wasn't. Reed had given the lock to one of his prophets, instructing them to secure the cellar door with it. But why? Because he wanted Paxton to find this place. The only reason she's standing here right now is because he orchestrated it. She isn't here because she chose to be. She's here because he made her choose to be. Paxton tells him that, in your eyes, she says, the one true religion is control. You're right, he says. Religion is just a system of control. Yes, I keep my subjects cold and hungry, but that just makes them easier to control. And you're right again. One of my subjects did go off book when she said this isn't real. As he speaks, he casually cuts off one of his subject's fingers. But why? Paxton asks, to which Reed answers, why do you let me? Every decision you've made, Reed says, has been made by others. Where you live, who you worship, even the kind of underwear you wear. Reed smirks. Your magic underwear. Before he can say another word, Paxton stabs him in the neck with the letter opener and runs. She rushes through the house, finding herself in the hidden office between the belief and disbelief stairs. She blocks the entrance to the cellar. Then she turns, runs back into the basement, and finds the hatch open. And Reed is right behind her. His knife plunges into her stomach. Paxton collapses, crawling into the corner as Reed staggers toward her, blood pouring from his neck. He says, pray for us. Prayer doesn't work, she says. She tells him about an experiment where people were divided into two groups. One received prayers, the other didn't, and the results were conclusive. Prayers do not change the outcome, but, she admits, it is beautiful that we all pray for each other, even when we know it doesn't make a difference. Paxton starts to pray as Reed crawls on top of her, but as he gets closer, a log covered in nails slams into the side of his face. Barnes stands over him, barely alive, using the last of her strength to save Paxton. She falls back onto the ground. Paxton stumbles to her feet and rushes to Reed's office. There, she studies the dollhouse and finds an exit. She climbs through the window, escaping Reed's house of religious horror, and she runs. She runs until she can't anymore, and then a butterfly lands on her hand. And that's a wrap. I love Hugh Grant as a villain. He absolutely crushed his role as the man who controls the narrative while constantly trying to convince his subjects that they have free will. Both Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East were phenomenal. As Mormon missionaries, I think everyone should watch this movie and reconsider their views on religion.